Trump is really on a roll. A Venezuelan tanker full of oil has been taken to an American port. It was one of the shadow so-called tankers that was transporting oil which the United States calls unauthorized, allegedly supporting terrorism according to our claims. The ship was going from Venezuela to Iran, where the oil was supposed to be processed and then transported to China. What is the shadow fleet? The shadow fleet is mostly old tankers bought by Russia, China, Iran, and Venezuela, but registered in small countries, and their ownership is deliberately obscured. These vessels, well, let's say they turn off their automatic identification system transponders and go dark, which is why they're called shadow vessels. At that point, tracking them is impossible. They enter Russian, Iranian, and similar ports, and they falsify all sorts of records and reports about where they've been. The ships often change fake owners, change their names, call signs, and do everything possible to confuse where they're transporting oil and oil products from and to. Often oil is transferred from such tankers right in the open sea to clean tankers, and these clean ones, so to speak, then transport the sanctioned oil as if it were being legally shipped. Analysts estimate the global shadow fleet includes 1,000 to 1,500 tankers. On December 20, the United States seized the first tanker back on December 10, the second one on December 20, and on December 21, American boats and helicopters began pursuing yet another, the third tanker. So, according to international regulations, the use of force should occur in stages, starting with a radio warning, then escorting by sea and air. And only after that, if the vessel does not stop, does not listen, and so on, then what is called a seizure under United States maritime law takes place. A court can grant permission to arrest a vessel if the charges are brought by border guards, the FBI, or the Coast Guard, and there are reasonable suspicions that the vessel is carrying something illegal or that a crime has been committed on board. At the moment, off the coast of Venezuela, as they say in English, there are 7 they call them false flag tankers. Well, false flag, which Washington has directly named as the #1 target for further interceptions there, or something else we don't know. If a month ago the United States Navy was stopping boats with drugs, blowing them up there as soon as they headed toward the United States coast, now that same Navy is stopping and turning away tankers with sanctioned oil. 2 tankers are already on their way to Texas, where the oil is going to be declared as proceeds from illegal schemes. Why am I smirking? Because, well, basically they still have to prove that these schemes are illegal, and they'll confiscate it only if they can prove it. After that, the oil will be sold to American oil refineries, and the money will go to the Treasury. So, the first tanker, the skipper, the one that's already, so to speak, I think it's already in Texas, it's carrying somewhere between 1.6 and 1.9 million barrels of oil, for which the United States government can get around $100 million. And the other 2 tankers are of the same type. And, well, together they can carry up to 4 million barrels of oil. So if they really are carrying it, and if we really sell it, then about $250 million can be obtained after towing, transferring, and selling the oil. I don't know for sure if the second or maybe the third one is loaded. I think the second one is loaded, but I don't know if the third one is or not. But, so to speak, if yes, then all 3 vessels are planned to be confiscated again through the court. It's not like they just wanted to and confiscated them. Yes, you have to jump through certain hoops and either sell them or lease them to oil carriers.
Yes, George, I think that you are actually seeing a rapid increase and escalation of pressure on Maduro and his regime, his illegal regime. Before we continue, I want to mention these 2 tankers in 2 days. This is forcing the American military. They are really expanding their operations there, considering what we have in the southern Caribbean Sea. So if we go back just a few days, as you mentioned, to the announced blockade, now you see how the United States is backing up its words about the blockade with real actions. So if you look at it, you start to see an increase in military pressure. But secondly, and I think this is very important, is the fact that this is also economic pressure. You know about export and financial tools that Maduro uses, and I specifically say Maduro, not necessarily Venezuela, because he is very corrupt. So these resources come from export shipments, more specifically illegal oil supplies carried out through these, as Lucas said, dark fleet ships.
Senator Rand Paul, who always calls for caution in dealings with neighbors, spoke out against aggressive attacks on Venezuela.
Entry and exit from Venezuela are all part of the United States pressure campaign on Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. I invite Mark Chandler, Director of Government Relations at Coastal Carolina University, and also a former senior military intelligence officer.
I agree with every word he said, but I have a question. Are we, the United States, ready to tolerate the situation with Maduro? And if not, then what can we do to stop the flow of drugs into the United States? It should be said right away that only 1/10 of the drugs coming into the United States come from him, and then significantly more comes through Canada and through Mexico. Maybe some comes through, but less. And also to make Venezuela comply, to take back the criminals they sent into our country, meaning they were sending us gangsters, sending us half-crazy people. Again, I haven't checked them myself, but that's what our border guards, our authorities say. And besides that, really a lot to ask. I don't know what it's called. Gangs in Russian, in English it's gangs. In Russian it's bands, probably. But bands doesn't quite reflect the huge number of members in these very gangs, tattooed thugs there, who've already done time, so to speak. Hired directly from prisons. Some were under 18 and placed with us. Oh my God. In general, Venezuela doesn't want to take back these guys, all the criminals and convicts. And in the United States, as you know, the decision to go to war is made not by the president, but by Congress. Many exceptional circumstances exist, but by law, if the president starts something urgent without Congress, he is required to notify Congress within 48 hours. If authorization for war is not given, he is required to end it within 60 days. Trump says that this is not a war. He says, like, I'm not starting anything like that. This is something completely different. This is about stopping the transportation of drugs and illegal oil. Fitro Immigrants, editor. Just like Somalis in Minnesota, Venezuelans in, let's say, Nebraska, quickly organized in the United States to rob everything they could from the rich.
Breaking news. A federal grand jury in Nebraska has indicted dozens of people on 2 counts for an alleged automated teller machine jackpotting scheme. 54 people have been charged for participating in a conspiracy to install malware and steal millions of dollars from ATMs across the United States. One of the accused is Jimena Ramina Araya Navarra. The United States Attorney's Office states that she is the alleged leader of Trendiger and a Venezuelan artist. Federal authorities claim that this nationwide scheme involved burglaries of many ATMs located in Nebraska. If found guilty, the accused face prison terms from 20 to 335 years.
So why are we focusing so much on Venezuela and oil? Is it because of drugs, national security, or the squads of enforcers they've sent here? The answer is actually simple. All of the above. All of the above. We're fed up with the Venezuelans just like we were fed up with the Somalis, who annoyed us even more. But it's far away, and we'll deal with it. There are 250,000 of them, those very same Somali migrants, of which I think half came here illegally. So they were kind of cheating legally, but they were cheating along the way. 80 or 78% of them are on welfare and other programs, and they also steal. So it's really gotten out of hand. And is Venezuela really nearby? And to put an end to everything I've told you about, you need to... The White House says not to defend yourself, but to attack. What do you think? I wonder, is attacking really the best defense?
The leadership is using Joe Biden's open border as a simple and permanent solution to all their problems. Why spend money keeping prisoners when you can just send them all to the United States? Why spend money caring for the mentally ill when you can just send them to the United States? Why do all the hard work of running the country instead of getting rich? When you can just send all your poorest voters to the United States and not just Nicolas. Maduro is guilty, Mexico did exactly the same, and in the clip that I'll show you a bit later. The president admits it. Yes, it's regime change. Nicolas Maduro is an illegitimate leader heading a narco government. He lost the last election but refused to give up power. He got closer to China, Russia, and Iran and allowed our foreign adversaries to settle in our backyard, hence the national security concerns. It's all about oil. Hugo Chavez nationalized the oil industry in 2007 and stole tens of billions of dollars in American oil assets. And of course, it's also about drugs, but realistically, not that much fentanyl comes to us from Venezuela. But this is clearly revenge. Hundreds of thousands of gang members, criminals, and mentally unstable people were sent to the United States, endangering the public and worsening a humanitarian crisis. And this is bad not only because these people are dangerous and cause social dysfunction, but it also creates a network for the cartel government made up of people who have settled on enemy territory. This is an age-old trick. Do what we say in America, or we'll hurt your family back home in Venezuela. And their economy is extremely fragile. And Nicolas Maduro's house of cards is propped up by illegal oil sales to Iran and China. That's why today we've already seized a third tanker.
Senator Leslie Graham, whom you know, also has his own view on events in the Caribbean Sea.
Here's what I hope, that President Trump will sign my bill, which has 83 co-authors, and impose tariffs against countries like China that buy cheap Russian oil. He will label Russia a state sponsor of terrorism for abducting 20,000 Ukrainian children. And most importantly, he will seize ships transporting sanctioned Russian oil, just like they do in Venezuela.
That is from Rendapola to Leslie Graham. There is a diversity of opinions, and all of them are justified by past similar cases. And by the way, on the other side, there are the Democrats who are against everything Trump-related in general, and they also have their own arguments.
Mr. Speaker, James Madison warned us, saying that there is no greater wisdom in any part of our Constitution than in the provision that entrusts the question of war and peace to the legislative branch, not the executive. Madison called this the true jewel of Congress. The Founding Fathers knew that concentrating the power to declare war in one group leads to the loss of freedom. If the president believes that military action against Venezuela is justified and necessary, he must make his case and Congress must vote. Before American lives and resources are spent on regime change in South America, let's be honest about the likely consequences. Do we truly think Nicolas Maduro will be replaced by a modern George Washington? And how did similar situations turn out in Cuba, Libya, Iraq, or Syria? Previous presidents told us to go to war over weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist. Now it's the same scenario, only they're telling us that drugs are the weapons of mass destruction. If it were really about drugs, we would have bombed Mexico.
So, Thomas Massie made it clear that he is against military action in any form for any reason, and ideally I agree with him. But personally, I believe there's no better use for the United States military than making sure we don't have terrorist narco states being created right next to us. Back then, Pablo Escobar tried to run for president of Colombia, and I think it was after he had already become governor of the Sinaloa province, but he didn't win. Because the international community, and especially the United States, would have absolutely destroyed Colombia's economy for electing the world's biggest cocaine leader. Since then, these quasi-narco governments, backed by politicians who let them act with impunity, have operated as cartels, kill political opponents, and share profits with the government. This way, the government can plausibly deny involvement. They won't face condemnation or sanctions from the international community, and we see this not only in Venezuela but also in Mexico with their president Claudia Sheinbaum.
That's quite an accusation against the president of Mexico, saying that she exists thanks to the cartels, that it's all hand in glove, and that she's no more to blame for the drug epidemic than Maduro.
I can't even count how many of her political opponents have been killed in the last 2 years. And that's because most of the fentanyl coming into America goes through Mexico. Donald Trump announced news that should terrify both Claudia Sheinbaum and her cartels.
3 days ago, the president reclassified fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction. This has huge consequences for Mexico, not just for Venezuela. Fentanyl comes from Mexico, and we know that the president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, has extensive ties to the cartels. So what do you think this means for the hemisphere and for the bilateral relationship between us and Mexico?
I think they should be more careful. I think there's a new sheriff in town now. His name is Donald J. Trump on the world stage. No one tops MEM. I don't want him teaching my daughter's Sunday school, but I sure as hell love him in the White House because he's going after the bad guys and they know it. That's why we're not being insulted internationally like we were during Biden's last 4 years. We would write stern letters or ask for permission from the United Nations. We have a real president in the White House who understands everything. That's why America is stronger than ever militarily.
That was Tom Burchik. He's a congressman from Tennessee, in other words, Venezuela. This is preparation, rehearsal, working out a scenario to stop the flow of drugs, banditry, and millions of semi-literate peasants who, so to speak, were coming to us and, in general, are still trying to come. People who can't feed themselves, who really can't participate in the new economy in any way. Simply put, no. So the flow actually comes not so much from Colombia and Venezuela, but from our much bigger and much closer neighbor called Mexico. Mexican cartels. Mexico's ruling coalition, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, is seriously tainted by ties to drug lords. Yes, probably it's impossible any other way in Mexico, which doesn't really justify Mexico in our eyes. United States intelligence, for example, tracked the transfer of $2 million into the election campaign of López Obrador. That was in 2006. He was the president of Mexico before Claudia Sheinbaum, of course. Also, AMLO received $4 million through 2 advisors of the president, the very one I mentioned, from the founder of the Los Segas cartel. Also, the Sinaloa cartel, a cartel well known to us, sent large amounts of cash for the personal needs of the top government officials. In Mexico, Claudia continues the military security model, meaning she keeps the army patrolling the streets, but at the same time, along with this attempt to establish some kind of order, let's say, in their prisons, by the tradition of our Latin neighbors, they continue to torture people. So opposition leaders suddenly disappear, and from time to time, let's say, law enforcement officers kill prisoners without trial, and there are no consequences from the president or any other authorities. During her year of presidency, from October 1924, there were 21 recorded murders of active politicians, mayors, deputies, candidates from various parties, mostly from the opposition, Sheinbaum. But during the 1924 election campaign, about 60 politicians were killed. So the bloodiest election campaign in Mexico. I suspect it's the same in the world too, actually. Several of those killed were from Sheinbaum's party. I think it's called Morena, which was part of Andrés Manuel López Obrador's bloc. Previously, killings were public, but in Sheinbaum's era, I'm not sure if this relates to her. I just called it that because she's in power now. Usually people are kidnapped and nothing is known about them afterward. We don't know if all this is connected to Cloudy or if it's just an even greater takeover of power by criminal organizations. In any case, Mexico has either long ago or recently become a country ruled by crime, but that's not a reason to attack and seize it. Let's say Russia and Ukraine are the same. These are countries ruled by crime. I suppose significantly more than 90% of all countries in the world throughout human history, at least in our civilization, have been societies ruled by a criminal elite, and that's more normal than not. In Russia, it merged with the bureaucracy, and the same seems to be happening in Mexico. By the way, the same thing happened in Venezuela with the arrival of Maduro, meaning either the cartels took over bureaucratic positions or there was a merger. I'm not certain, but today they appear to function as one coordinated system. There's no need for anyone to secretly transfer millions to anyone. So, but again, that's not a reason to go to war with Mexico. Trump claims, and quite insistently, that the Mexican government protects the cartels, which carry out subversive activities in the United States because they bring in drugs, weapons, prostitution, and child slaves up to 14 years old. The country of Mexico does nothing to stop this flow of goods into the United States. All the goods I mentioned, including prostitution. Mexico has not stopped the caravans of illegals coming to us in any way, despite numerous appeals from Trump. In our eyes, drug dealers are terrorists. Trump considers the cartels to be foreign terrorist organizations and is waging war against them. The fact that Mexico isn't fighting them, or isn't fighting them enough, or is just pretending to fight them, who knows, actually makes it an accomplice to terror. Mexico refuses to allow United States teams onto its territory to fight the cartels, which indirectly confirms their connection and dependence on these very cartels. Here's what we believe Mexico must do to be our good trading neighbor. First, close the border on their side and stop fentanyl, cocaine, and heroin from flowing into the United States. Second, stop migrants who are passing through Mexico to come to us. Third, join forces with the United States Armed Forces in the fight against drug dealers. And fourth, establish mutually beneficial trade relations. But Mexico did not take this path. I suspect again that the leadership simply cannot do this because it is directly dependent, afraid, and so on. These very guys from the cartels. But this means an inevitable confrontation after the decision about our relations with Venezuela, maybe with Colombia. I'm sure we'll turn our attention to Mexico. What does Trump and his administration want? What is the ultimate goal of Trump's doctrine that changed America's long-standing opposition? Flying all over the world, dealing with conflicts anywhere, but not taking any action in their own backyard. The answer is, I've already talked about the Trump doctrine, but its essence is that it cannot establish the way of life we like all over the world. It's unrealistic and demands our sacrifice, effort, and money. America may achieve peaceful coexistence near its borders. There's Canada, Greenland, Latin America, and the Caribbean, places from which, let's say, apart from goods and services and, I don't know, maybe tourists, nothing else really comes to us. Yes, there is danger and harm, mainly from the communo-fascists, China, Iran, Russia, who have settled there, and from drug gangs and cartels that have joined forces with government agencies. By the way, did you know that St. Petersburg, during the time of Sobchak and Putin, became one of the major centers for receiving and distributing drugs from Latin America and the Middle East? And did it distribute them throughout all of Europe? So both Putin, Sobchak, and the other democratic liberals made good money on exporting drugs, on importing, and then on exporting drugs again. So to their liberal European friends and drinking buddies, wouldn't be surprised if they were also partners. These subtitles were created by Dima Year, Voldemort. Addicts Orinogoate strata. From drug lords, narcotic substances. That is, the complete destruction of the cartels, their laboratories, their warehouses, their communications, their distribution networks. And this can only be done by gaining access to the territories where the cartels rule and cooperating with the governments or militaries of those countries. And this, I think, is our ultimate goal at this stage. Well, the ultimate goal, of course, is to create that space, so to speak, a paradise on Earth. But this is the intermediate ultimate goal. That's what I just told you. Is it possible to carry out Trump's plan? All of these are correct and great tasks, but are they simple? No. Do we need to change some law of nature to achieve them? No, of course not. So that means they are possible to accomplish. On the other hand, with a population that's a quarter of the Earth's, it's simply impossible to establish your own order throughout the world and for a long time, because we have 350 million and the rest are 7 billion. That means you have to stretch your forces so thin that everywhere will be too weak to control. Genghis Khan then solved these problems easily and simply. Once he wiped out the population of an entire region in Afghanistan, an enormous city and a whole valley of villages, with a total population of 1 million people. In a week of continuous killings, they killed 80,000. So his cavalry, 80,000 of them, spent a week slaughtering people, and in the end, they wiped out about 1 million people. And this made such an impression on the surrounding world that no one dared to rebel again. But the United States cannot, and most likely will not, due to misunderstanding an order, destroy 1 million civilians. I mean, I'm almost sure of that. And that's why the United States alone can't keep the world in check. Realizing that we can't build a balanced, non-aggressive world or a non-aggressive society across the entire planet, we set a different goal to build it around our own borders in the so-called Western Hemisphere. Because you see, either we can't do it anywhere, right? Or we can do it somewhere, and that somewhere will be concentrated not far from home. That's why, as I already said, we need to cleanse these regions of the filth I've already mentioned and establish partnership relations with our neighbors. According to the golden rule of Judaism, do not do to others what you would not want them to do to you. It's easier said than done. Of course, but we have Trump, who seems to have already proven that he can do things that others call difficult and I would even say impossible. And somehow he manages to do it. He does it. See you soon. Goodbye.